Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics podcast and our 2026 Drayton and Farlington Ward Hustings. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury. Good evening.
Well, another Hustings. It's like
Get to
they're
it one
like
day.
buses. Well, they're like buses, aren't they? You don't have any for ages, and then suddenly three come along in 5 days. This is fabulous.
Very much. Very
So,
much. So this is our second hustings of the day, but it's our last hustings of the 2026 local elections. This time, as Ian's just said, with the Drayton and Farlington ward hustings. I'll introduce the candidates in just a second, but let me just kind of go into a bit of an explanation of how we run our hustings and how we got here, and also list out all of the candidates for Drayton and Farlington. Please also don't forget, if you are watching in landscape and want to watch in portrait, or vice versa, I'm popping the links into the chat now, which allow you to switch to the other, because we're live streaming in landscape in YouTube as well as in portrait. And by all means, do join along with the comments. And if you'd like to give us a like, follow, share, comment, that would be lovely to see the conversation moving forward. So our hustings. So we've held hustings in Portsmouth local elections since 2022. It's fair to say that the responses this year have been lower than previous years. This year, however, for logistical reasons, we've invited candidates standing for parties which achieved at least 1% of the citywide vote share in either the local or general elections in 2024. So, and that has been taken from the results page for 2024's elections on Portsmouth City Council's election page. So in practice, that would mean the Conservative Party, the Green Party, Labour, Liberal Democrats, Portsmouth Independent Party, and Reform. Those were all the parties achieving that kind of minimum in those elections. So about 2 weeks before the close of the nominations, we contacted all of the incumbents that we knew were restanding, and the parties themselves, and the candidates that we were already aware of. And after close of nominations, when they were published on April the 10th, we also repeated that exercise to contact as many of the candidates for the local parties as we could. Not all of those were we able to find contact details but we had some help from the organisers at some of the local parties, and we appreciate that. So with regards to Drayton and Farlington, we can confirm that although both Reform and Green were initially expressing interest, they were then unable to actually confirm to dates that we'd suggested. So we weren't able to include them in the hustings. We did not receive a response from the Liberal Democrat candidate. So your candidates in Drayton and Farlington. So you've got we've got Simon Bosher, the Conservatives, who's the incumbent, who's joining us today. We've got the other candidates were Stephen Burt for Reform, Samantha Darragh for the Liberal Democrats, Matthew Holland for Labour, who's also joining us today, and Quentin Kelly for the Green Party. So those are your candidates for Drayton and Farlington. So how do our hustings work? It's quite simple. Each candidate has a 2-minute opening and a 90-second closing speech. All of our questions have been provided to the candidates in advance because we want you to be able to judge their best answer rather than their ability to perform on a camera when a spotlight's been put on them. We'll randomise who answers what in which question in what order, although when we only have 2 candidates, to be honest, that usually just defers to, we'll reverse the order in every other question, and Ian and I will take turns in asking the questions. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. And when all of the candidates have answered, but they've both answered in this case, there is an optional 30-second rebuttal they can use to address any of the points brought up by the other contributors. However, we tend to caution candidates against overusing this, because if you just use it to get the last word, voters tend not to really like it that much. That. And that then brings us to introducing our 2 candidates. So joining us, as I said, today are Simon Bosher from the Conservatives and Matthew Holland from Labour. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, then without further ado, let's get straight into our opening speeches. So Matthew, from the result of our highly technical coin toss, you have the first speech. Are you ready for your opening speech?
Yep, all good. Thank you very much, Simon.
Okay.
So yeah, just have you
Oh,
started the
sorry.
timer?
Yeah, away you go. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm Matthew. I live locally in the ward. I've lived in the area my entire life. Studied at local schools. I went to Court Lane and then Springfield School. And I also, as a bit of background to myself as well, I work for both of our local MPs in Portsmouth. And I really feel that casework and the basics of responding to constituents is an absolute foundation for being a good councillor. And I do commend Simon. I know he spends a lot of time tirelessly responding to constituents, and if elected, that's something I definitely want to keep going forward. I believe that we only make good decisions when we make decisions with the community and with residents at heart. And for that reason, a lot of my pledges have been around community mapping and engagement, making sure that we're making decisions with constituents and with residents around the issues that really matter to them. So whether that's traffic issues, whether that's parking, whether that's antisocial behaviour, and whether that's retail crime, the big issues that are affecting our area. And going forwards, I want to make sure that I'm a voice for our residents and that I'm always listening to residents whenever I can.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Simon, are you ready for your opening speech?
I am indeed. I don't think I'm going to take 2 minutes. My name's Simon Bosher, and I've had the privilege of being the Drayton Farlington Ward Councillor for 24 years now, which I think is probably longer than Matthew's actually been alive, but I'm sure he'll confirm that one to me. I was actually born in the ward, physically born into 2nd Avenue in Farlington. I've lived in the ward all of my life. People know where I live in Eveley Road. I attended Solent infant and junior schools and then went on to Springfield. In fact, I was the very first intake of pupils when it was called Springfield. Anybody a year older than me, it would have been Manor Court. Same schools that my children went to. After college, my first job was at the former Dunham Bush site, which is now the Sainsbury's site. And actually, I designed all the refrigeration equipment that went into the new Sainsbury's site in Fitzherbert Road. 4 generations of my family live in the ward. My father, apart from myself, I've got my brother and sister and their families that live in the ward. And I've got my grandchildren that live in the ward as well. So very embedded in the local community. Always believed in residents making the decisions that shape their lives. We've held monthly ward surgeries, which I introduced some 22 years ago, very, very well attended. And we continue to work and liaise with residents in every aspect of what happens in Drayton Farlington. I think having a lifelong connection with the ward is an important factor. I'm not going to criticise others for not necessarily living in the ward, but I think at the end of the day, the decisions that I take affect not only myself and my family, but also people that I regard as my neighbours and my friends. Thank you.
Okay, was that actually the end? Because that was miraculously right on the money, if it was.
I think it's got used to having that 6-minute timer in the council chamber. You get to know how long these things are.
Perfect.
Yes, not quite the buzzer though, but yes, we take your bit. But thank you both. Ian.
Perfect. That leads us on to our first question, which I'll address first to Simon. So obviously you've both been knocking a lot of doors. So what are the top 3 issues in the ward and what would you do to fix them if elected, Simon?
Well, the 3 that I keep coming across in particular are parking issues, only in certain areas of the ward. Certainly road safety, antisocial driving behaviours are one of the other issues that come along. And also things like enhancing and protecting our parks and open spaces. I know Portsmouth likes to promote itself as that great waterfront. By the same token, we have Portsdown Hill up here, which is a triple SI and something that certainly for the wards across the north of the city, we're extremely proud of. Looking at what we're doing, we have issues with areas around the Fitzherbert Road Industrial Estate. We've been working with residents there with regards to parking issues. We did a survey there last year. and I'm pleased to say it's on the residents' parking zone list for consultation. So hopefully that will be ratified shortly for that particular area. With regards to road safety issues, we've introduced a lot of things, certainly around pedestrian safety. So we've introduced 4 crossings into the ward. We've got another one coming into the ward on Portsdown Hill, which is the funding has been secured for that. We get the antisocial driving along the top of the hill. Those cameras, Donna Jones and I have been working on very, very closely. And pleased to say, and I can announce it now, that those cameras will be going in before the end of this particular month. So that will be good news for a lot of residents in that aspect. Also, a lot to do with road safety in various areas. We've got funding for areas around Lower Farlington Road. So that scheme is already out to consultation and should happen in the summer. And I'm working on other areas like road safety schemes in and around Springfield School. So there's a lot of work going on in a lot of various areas, but certainly we're seeking to make changes where residents are demanding them.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. And obviously, Matthew, you've been knocking doors. What are you hearing as the top 3?
Yeah, no, I echo a lot of what Simon said. Parking is a big issue. So the speeding, road safety, kind of antisocial vehicle use is another thing that's come up a lot. And then kind of concerns about antisocial behaviour and sort of retail crime as well. So firstly on parking, again, want to pay tribute to Simon and the work he's done in setting in motion the RPZ for the Waterworks Roads sort of area. I'm not generally a supporter of residence permit zones because I oftentimes feel like they kind of push problems further out of where the problem already originated. Area that would really benefit from it. It's closed off enough that it wouldn't kind of push the parking problem onto kind of neighbouring areas, being a kind of closed estate. So I, if elected, would do all I can to kind of support on that and push further on the consultation. And with sort of speeding and road safety work, again, Simon's done a lot of great work on kind of pushing for traffic calming measures, and that's definitely something I want to kind of continue on and make sure that we're doing, again, as I said before, sort of community mapping events, making sure that we're engaging residents to make decisions about what areas they're kind of highlighting concerns about and where the kind of big problems are for them. And then on antisocial behaviour and kind of retail crime, I know there's been a lot of talk recently about shoplifting and issues like that, particularly with the Tregaron Avenue co-op, which is obviously a bit further from sort of where a kind of main hotspot would be, like Drayton shops, but working closely with our local neighbourhood officers and again, working on kind of community mapping, making sure the residents are engaging in terms of the areas that they feel less safe in and the areas where they think that a better kind of police presence and better measures around CCTV would really make a difference for them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Perfect. I shall just pause for a second to see whether either of you want to come back with a rebuttal, but it seems like you're pretty aligned there. So I will throw you for the next question.
Thank you very much. Okay. So it's almost like we've pre-prepared and understand what things are likely to come up. So traffic and parking, frequent frustrations for residents. How would you tackle them? And I'll put that first, please, to Matthew.
Yep, as I said, so obviously supporting, particularly in the one main area we've heard kind of concerns about, which is the Waterworks Road kind of estate, pushing for further measures with the residents' parking zone there. And more generally, I say this myself, I would love to see more work being done across the city, but also locally to promote active transport and kind of better cycling provision, and whether that's with joining the dots on cycle lanes or whether it's improving cycle lockup storage facilities and stuff like that, and wherever possible kind of improving as well bus services in our area. That's something that I know that the Ports of Labour team across the board are really kind of pushing on, because I think one of the best ways to kind of solve the problems of traffic and parking is to get less cars on the road. It's that simple. And this is kind of what we're looking for with the future, where driving is becoming less and less of a kind of sustainable thing. We need to be pushing and sort of looking to the future around improving active transport and improving accessibility for public transport in particular.
Okay, thank you very much. Same to Simon.
Well, I'm not a great fan of RPZs, and I think they should be used where they are necessary. And obviously, we've highlighted the Waterworks Road area that's already onto the residents parking scheme, so that will come out for consultation. We had a previous one. We've got another little one in Drayton Farlington up in the Burrell Avenue area, which was specifically there for the frustrations around QA parking. So that one was put in a number of years ago to address that, but there's been no calls to expand anything at all, and we would look very, very carefully if that's the case. There are other ways of actually doing it. We had major problems with an every delivery service based in Fitzherbert Road, so we introduced a temporary traffic regulation order there to actually unblock that road of all the people that were waiting to collect parcels, and really made it a complete danger in that particular road. But going on to the wider issues and touching on some of the things that Matthew has actually said. I drive an electric car, and one of the things that City Council has been doing is rolling out things like electric vehicle charging points, which I know certainly in the south of the city is caused a lot of controversy, but certainly the electric vehicle use was beginning to increase. But then, unfortunately, Rachel Reeves turned around and said we're going to slap a 4p per mile thing on electric vehicles, charge on electric vehicles. But we ploughed on with things like putting in electric vehicle charging points, and I've argued we're going to reach a tipping point. But when you've got companies like Ford and Volkswagen saying that this sort of policy is the wrong policy at the wrong time, and we're now seeing electric vehicles sales into Portsmouth dropping off, then you've got to start questioning what's happening on that basis as well.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Anyone need a rebuttal on that one? Cool. Ian.
Marvellous. Over to me then. So what would you do to breathe new life into the shopping areas in Portsmouth, or is high street and retail as we know it already dead? And can I ask that first to Simon?
Well, I wouldn't say retail is actually dead. I mean, I do a bit of online buying, but there are certain things when I physically like to go into a shop and make my decisions there, if you see what I mean. So I still think there is a place for it. If I talk locally about Drayton shops, remarkably, we are very COVID resilient with a good mix of businesses down there. We got involved in things like financing a lot of extras, the Christmas tree lights throughout Drayton, and a variety of other things like benches, minor things to enhance the public realm. And I think that's got to be part of the offering. I mean, as a city council, we can't choose what businesses go into which shops in that respect, but we can make certain places an attractive destination to go to. And I think Gun Wharf is a good example of that. It is an attractive place to go to. Whether the shops are the right sort of mix for what most people want is somewhat irrelevant in that. People sometimes go to Gun Wharf just for that particular thing. But I think we've also got to see what we can do to tackle things like the vape shops and things like the Turkish barber shops that are popping up all over the place, to try and get some of these shops actually open to make it a destination of choice. But certainly talking locally from a Drayton Farlington point of view, we have a good mix of local businesses, which I think are attractive, and certainly a lot of people still refer to it as Drayton Village and make it their destination of choice to actually shop locally.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. So Matthew, your thoughts on retail in Portsmouth and Drayton and Farlington? What would you do to revitalise?
I mean, I share a lot of Simon's sentiment in terms of saying that it doesn't need revitalising as such. I mean, we are really well served locally with a lot of great businesses and a good mix of businesses. And we've had quite a few new businesses open up certainly in the time since I've moved back from uni. So it's an area that I think really does attract people to go out and shop locally and things like that. But Simon really touched on the point about tackling the spread of kind of more illicit businesses, and I think that's something we definitely need to look at across the board. I think there's a lot of a lot of kind of debate around whether or not it would be better to see an empty business or another barber shop or another vape shop open up in a lot of our high streets across the city. And definitely something I think we should be looking to, particularly in the future with kind of increased licensing powers locally, is trying all we can to tackle these businesses, to block licenses where possible, and to take faster action in shutting down these businesses that don't serve the public, which put children's lives at risk with terms of selling illicit vapes or kind of illegal products that are untaxed. And kind of another point is on retail crime in particular. That's definitely something we need to be looking at. We hear from businesses all the time around shoplifting becoming an epidemic issue, and that's definitely something I know that the police locally are looking at kind of addressing further, whether it's kind of big kind of action days, making sure they're getting out and making sure they have a visible presence on our high streets as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. I'll pause for a second before throwing you on to the next question.
Yeah, I just want to come back on that if I can.
Yeah.
I mean, Matthew is right when it comes to Drayton Farlington. I mean, I'm regularly in and out of all the shops in Drayton. I do tend to use it. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm on first name terms with the guy in the chip shop, but I'd like that to think that's because I've helped him out from a counsellor point of view, rather than the fact that I go there an awful lot. But certainly, if we roll back to 2024, and I stand by the fact that we have a good mix. We had one Turkish barber in Drayton. We've now got 3. And whenever I go through Drayton Farlington, there's never anybody in there getting their hair cut. So you have to question what's going on.
Perfectly fair. And Matthew, do you want to add anything else?
No, I mean, I agree. It's that kind of stretch where obviously we've had a couple of HMO applications put in recently. It's that stretch that is getting a much less kind of focus, and I think it definitely needs a lot of kind of attention being done to it. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Question.
Okay, thank you very much. So how will you increase the availability of defibrillators and make sure that they are shared on the Responder app and BHF network so that they can be found when they're needed? And that's first to Matt, please.
It's a great question. It's a very specific question, I will say as well. But again, I want to pay tribute as well to the work that Simon's done in particular in getting using SIL funding to promote a defib at the Blades Barbers on Tregaron Avenue, and definitely using further SIL funding to look at kind of other areas in the ward that would benefit from that, whether or not it's kind of further down in Farlington or on Drayton Shops itself. And I think one of the big things is, and I know Simon's worked closely with 40 for Frankie, who are one of the ones that kind of install a lot, a charity that install a lot of these AEDs in the city. And I think one thing that would really be beneficial is kind of linking up third sector organisations with the kind of statutory bodies, making sure that council registers are talking to charity organisations and making sure that that kind of coverage is well communicated to residents, so that they know that if they're in distress or if they see someone else in distress, they know where to go and how to kind of help them.
Thank you very much. Simon?
Well, I think you slightly pardon the pun, but things like defibrillators are very close to my heart, because obviously one of my previous ward colleagues, a guy called Andrew Story, that some of you may remember, Matthew probably won't, he actually collapsed and died of a massive heart attack in Albert Road. And I'm not saying a defibrillator probably would have saved him. It was a pretty devastating heart attack, but obviously there was no means to actually save him available. I mean, certainly in Drayton Farlington, and by the way, Matthew, there is one in Drayton Shops. It's bolted to, I call it the Drayton Centre, but I go back long enough to call it the Drayton Institute, that we financed and we put that in there as part of the renovations to Drayton Institute. We worked with the residents in Carmarthen Avenue and financed one to go onto the lower hill slopes at the top of the Welsh estate. That was open last year. You've already mentioned the Blades one that we put in earlier on. We worked with Fleur de Lis to put another one into Drayton Park. And we're currently working on another two sites more Farlington related at this moment in time. You're right, we've been working very closely with 40 for Frankie, and although we were in election period, we have been liaising with a local charity as well, because as much as the defibrillators do talk you through it, and I've used them on dummies and stuff like that, so I know they're very good. There's always a nervousness around actually using one, and we're planning to introduce some sessions at the Drayton Institute. We're talking to them where people can come in and learn how these things work and understand basic first aid, but didn't seem appropriate to do that in the election period, so we're waiting until later in the month before we start those sorts of things as well. So it's about having a holistic approach in that respect, introducing the hardware, but actually introducing the confidence to actually use them when you have an event like that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any rebuttals, Matthew? Did you have anything to come back on that one? Okay, all agree. Ian?
Perfect. So, thinking about this election, to what degree do national politics overshadow the local issues, and which is more important, party or personal? Can I put that to Simon, please?
Well, I think locally, I think the person is as much as anything, but the party banner does play a particular role in that as well. I do think some people conflate the difference between local and national elections. I've seen an awful lot of literature from some party or one party in particular that's talked about saving the NHS. Another one is obviously targeting the immigration sort of thing. As a local councillor, those are things that I have no control of. And there's been some very good posts going out as to what you are and are not voting for. This is about your local environment. It's about what happens directly outside your own front door, potholes, if you like, your bin collection. It's all the local sort of stuff. But obviously, national politics does get dragged into it. I mean, I've had a piece of literature through my door from, and I will mention it's from Amanda Martin, telling me that she saved me 150 quid off my energy bill. That's not something that local councils can get involved in, but ironically, I did actually check my energy bill from July 2024 up until January of this year, because I didn't want to include what Mr. Trump's been up to. And mine's actually gone up 20% in that length of time. So I'm struggling to see where I'm going to get that 150 quid back. But it is about local. And I think people need to focus on that. Certainly, I think residents are a lot more savvy about what they're voting for than perhaps some of the national parties actually give them credit for.
Thank you, Simon. So, Matthew, local versus national and party versus person. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely justified to kind of tie our perception of individual candidates to the party banner they take, and I'm always happy to kind of accept genuine criticism where it is of the Labour government and the reasons why I would be standing as a Labour candidate, but of standing up for my local area, which is the main reason why I'm standing in the first place anyway, because I truly care about my area and I care about local issues, and that's why I want to put myself forward in local politics. But I really share Simon's disappointment at the way in which kind of a lot of literature has been targeting very kind of specific issues, with a limited attempt even to try and introduce the candidates. And I think it's quite telling that certainly one of the parties that's been very heavy on national literature and national messaging, their candidate isn't here today in particular. But certainly I think it matters having a local voice who's going to be listening and standing up for local residents and trying all they can to engage with their residents rather than simply acting as a pawn for their party in a certain local area.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Anything to add, gentlemen?
No, I'll just add a little bit, I think, because I think you may well have been in the count when we had Boris as our Prime Minister and we lost a lot of very good local Conservative councillors. I think I provided Peter Henley with some political gold when I was very, very critical of Boris Johnson and how things have been actually handled in that respect. So personally, I'm not afraid to actually call it out, even if it's my own party, when I think they've got it wrong. But certainly, understanding that it is a local election, I think is extraordinarily important for people to do that.
Thank you, Simon. And yes, well, we were there. Matthew, anything to add?
Okay. Yes, that was indeed a night. Okay.
You should have seen my email from every radio station you could think of, and some that I'd never even heard of that wanted interviews after that.
Well, you opened the door, I guess. So, we look forward to your insight in the early hours of Friday, the 8th of May. Our microphone will be nearest, right? Remember us.
Thanks,
then,
guys.
So, whichever way it goes, yeah. So, okay. The question, our sixth question: HMOs, so homes of multiple occupancy. For those not in with the jargon, good, bad, or ugly. Would you seek to improve them, limit them, or stop them altogether? Matthew.
So yeah, I mean, I caught a bit of the Copner Ward Hustings earlier, and I really liked the response that my colleague Andy talked about there, where he was saying that this is a symptom very much of kind of our broken housing system, and the reason we're seeing so much in the way of kind of proliferation of HMOs, particularly in residential streets, is simply because we're not building enough affordable and social housing, and that's something that has not been a priority for many years in the city. And I fully appreciate that we're an island city, we're very limited on space, but it really angers me when I see empty buildings on in our high streets, or when I see empty space generally across our city, particularly when you're going down to the kind of commercial road area, and seeing how much potential there would be to provide the homes that we need in this city. But and I'm realistic in the sense of believing that our high streets need to blend a lot more around kind of multifunctional spaces and working to kind of have provide office spaces and potentially accommodation houses alongside commercial properties. But ultimately, we really need to get a grip on the issue of the proliferation in particularly residential areas, and luckily it's not something that's spread as much to Drayton Farlington yet, but it certainly is something that is a risk for the future, and certainly something we need to be vigilant on, whether it's sticking to the rules we have and making sure that we're following rules very tightly on planning decisions.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
I'd muted my microphone and forgot to unmute it. So, Simon, thank you very much, Matthew. Simon, HMOs.
Well, my colleague Ben Swan does an awful lot of work in this particular area, certainly because he sees a lot of them in Copner and regularly opposes them. But a lot of it has got to do with proper enforceability as much as anything else. I mean, where new developments are going in, and people will be familiar with the plans for things like what they call City Centre North. So that will be around the Cascades area for the people that don't understand the jargon. There is a lot of plans there for mixed use, so new affordable housing, as Matthew's already referred to. That's been in the plan for a long time. We've got redevelopments of Tipner, but we are one of the most densely populated cities outside of London, probably in Northern Europe, in effect. And a lot of it needs to be enforced properly, in my view. And I'll give you an example that actually I had a conversation with somebody on the doorstep early this morning. And this particular gentleman has a business down in the Hillsey area, and there was a property being redeveloped very close to him, where they started by chopping and changing the frontage of the property. Questions were asked, and they started building an extension on the side of it. And long and short, they reported it to the local Hillsey Ward councillors several times to get it investigated, and shamefully they did absolutely nothing about it. But the bottom line is a 3-bed family home ended up as an unregulated 10-bed HMO. Now, and I appreciate we're on a podcast here, but when he was challenged about what did planning say about it, it was expletive planning. I never bother with them whatsoever. And I think that's where we need to be looking at it closely, is around the enforcement to make sure that if an HMO is appropriate, that it is a decent quality place to actually live for somebody that fits their particular lifestyle.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. Anybody want any rebuttals needed? Anything else to come back on HMOs, Matthew?
Yeah. Just to add on, I think HMOs do have their place in the overall mix of our housing supply, but it's a very limited place, and it's for very specific points. And what we're seeing, particularly in kind of residential areas, as Simon's obviously pointed out, and Hillsey and Cotton there, is quite troubling. Really.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So, next question. What would you see as the council's input to try and tackle knife crime and violent issues within Portsmouth? So, can I ask Simon that question?
Well, certainly in the first instance, it's education. I think that's one of the things, and I've been into local schools, talked about the role of the council, talked about those sorts of issues. It's about giving people access to opportunities, removing the boredom, if you like. It's the old phrase, "The devil makes play for idle hands." But it's about working with the local partners, and we work very closely with Politely Rebellious and Kesha and her team that regularly go into schools to talk about exactly the issues around knife crime. But going wider, the City Council have been working very closely with Donna Jones, the Police and Crime Commissioner, because you also need that visibility as well. And I'm just going to chuck a few statistics, that has actually occurred and goes back. Since 2021, there's 851 additional police officers. That's the highest in over a decade. Crime is actually down by 15% since 2022. There's been 9 new police stations and front counters opened in the last 2 years, and there's going to be 3 more in the next 12 months. So there are a variety of things that we can do that dovetail together, so that we go with the if you like, the proactive education side of it and the visibility of the police. We in Drayton Farlington as councillors, we've regularly held public meetings where the police have actually been involved and they've come along, and certainly no visibility would have been an argument 7 or 8 years ago. It's not quite the argument that we see now. We regularly have the police coming into our ward surgeries. They have regularly drop in at our surgeries to actually sit down and talk through the particular issues, actually go forward as well. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done from both sides of it, but I argue that we are probably doing a pretty good job in Portsmouth.
Perfect. So a little bit over there, Simon, so sorry to cut in, but
no problem.
I will keep you close to time, if not exactly to time. So Matthew, same question to yourself. What should the council be doing more of?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very big danger here of kind of diluting this into kind of more national politics messaging, and I'll try and avoid doing that. But certainly, as Simon's pointed out, a joint effort between the Police and Crime Commissioner and some of the stuff the government have been doing on neighbourhood policing has really made a difference in terms of bringing in local named officers who know their patch deeply, who build up relationships within their community and are able to tackle these issues kind of at source much better. As Simon pointed out as well, I think better education is definitely one of the big things. I don't really remember people like Politely Rebellious when I was personally younger. I know they do great work now, and so the more we can do to kind of educate within schools around the dangers and and kind of that aspect, I think is definitely important. And I think on the kind of flip side, looking at what we're doing around kind of prevention on undue deaths and prevention on the kind of harder aspects of this, making sure that we're having, I know that's been raised previously by other candidates, but more work on bleed kits, I think, is something that we definitely need to be looking at. More surrender bins and can work on prevention stuff would be definitely a big thing as well. And I touched upon briefly earlier on around kind of community and neighbourhood engagement. And one of the things I really want to do if I'm elected is to host these kind of events and make sure that we're listening to residents around the kind of areas that they're concerned about, whether or not they have personal experience or direct experience they know of the sort of people who would carry a knife, or whether or not they have particular concerns or have seen issues in their area, and making sure that we're engaging as much and using their knowledge as much as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And I shall throw over to Simon for question 8.
Just to check, was there any rebuttals on that one at all? No. Okay. Lovely. So, question 8. So, just to make sure everybody's up to speed from our viewers' perspective. So, LGR, local government reorganisation, is the government's plan to essentially kind of separate the different councils in the Hampshire and the Solent area into 5 different large local authorities. It means that Portsmouth will join the South East Hampshire Unitary Authority. So that's taking in Fareham, Waterlooville, Havant, Gosport. And our question, and that's running alongside the whole thing about devolution, which is the elected mayor, with a shadow. It sounds more interesting than it is, but a shadow council being elected next year for the all-ups, so for the new authority, who won't actually become a live authority until 2028, with the elected mayor not being elected till 2028. So that's LGR and devolution. So apologies for the minor lesson. You'll be pleased to know that no one's going to be testing anyone on knowledge of devolution or LGR. So LGR, good or bad thing for Portsmouth? And I'll have that first to Matthew.
I mean, I would firstly say, on the principle, simply alone, I completely agree with it, and I think there's a lot of potential that it can bring for Portsmouth, in particular. We were talking sort of about the housing issue previously, and kind of the issues that we're having with, obviously, Portsmouth being such a densely populated city at the moment, even beyond kind of looking at kind of building these bigger developments and stuff like that. And I think there's the potential here to kind of look at things from a very kind of strategic way. So whether or not it's kind of making the most of land that might be available outside of Portsmouth, outside the island certainly, but outside of Portsmouth more generally, across the kind of region, so that we're making sure that we're meeting housing needs, and kind of then on the extension, kind of linking up kind of better commuting and stuff like that for people who live and who may work, in Portsmouth but live outside. There's a lot of potential here, but I would say very specifically, I'll refer back to Thomas Hoare, the Conservative candidate in Paulsgrove, when he gave his response on Wednesday at the multi-ward hustings, talking about how there's a lot of potential with this idea, but it needs the funding to work, and it needs central government to kind of address that in particularly. And I know that there has been some work on kind of changing local government funding settlement and making sure that deprived coastal communities are getting better funding to implement these changes in particular. And I think that has to be seen as a kind of precursor before considering these proposals. But as I said, I'll just reiterate that again. I agree with the principle of this.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Simon, LGR, good or bad?
Well, I'll say from the outset, I think it's a complete and utter mess, and it's a mess of the government's making. I mean, perhaps I'm in a better position than some in the fact that as leader of my group, I've been sat in so many meetings with the chief executive and the other leaders that it's become depressing. I do feel sympathy for Charlotte, because she's had to sit in those meetings equally depressed. I think it's been one of those things that nobody really knows what's happening. It was foisted on us as something that we either came to the table or we were out of it. So it was a sham consultation that we all had to meet lots of deadlines to actually achieve. Prompted lots and lots of questions, and I think it was Jim McMahon, the previous Minister for Local Government and Homelessness, never responded to a single letter from us whatsoever about the implications on it. We're going to be going into a shadow authority elections next year to be led by a mayor who isn't going to be elected until the year after. So you've got to ask questions around that. Nobody really knows what the financial implications are going to be. I've heard all manner of promises of extra money, but nothing has actually been tangible. It's tied up council officers doing things outside of their briefs. So the day-to-day stuff is getting left behind for pressure of work. I mean, you could go on and on and on. It's a little bit like an onion. You peel back a layer and find another particular problem. I guess part of my aspect where I look at it is the fact that we're going to be in a situation where there are going to be more councillors, if you like, deciding from outside of Portsmouth, deciding what happens to Portsmouth. And I've got a feeling that we may possibly lose our city's identity in the process. And that would be the last thing I'd actually want. But I think the government needs to shape up and sort themselves out, because at this moment in time, nobody really knows what this looks like.
I think we're going to be stealing the concept that LGR is an onion, especially with the graphic that if you cut it, people cry. So
that too.
So anything more to add on that one, Matthew?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That brings us to our final question. So Portsmouth is 100 this year, and Simon, you've been a councillor for nearly 24% of that. What makes you most proud about the city of Portsmouth?
I wondered where you were about to go with that comment, to be quite honest, Ian. I would say from the outset that if you live in Drayton Farlington, you have to wait another 6 years, because Drayton Farlington didn't become part of Portsmouth until 1932. I guess if you're in Drayton Farlington, you can celebrate 100 years of the city of Portsmouth this year, but then you get another go at it in 2032. So, yeah, chance to offer up a glass twice. Simply, well, I mean, I'm a Pompey boy born and bred, so I'm proud of my city anyway, and certainly, you cut me in half and it's blue. There's no red involved in it at all. But simply put, and I had the privilege of speaking at the opening of the centenary celebrations a couple of weeks ago. For my mind, it's the people. It's the people that make Portsmouth the city it is. It's the communities, it's the volunteers. If you like, it's the immigrants that come into our city. And with that, I'm talking about those sorts of people that work. I mean, certainly if you look at the dockyard when we're building ships and etc., the transient population coming down from Scotland to contribute to the building of the ships. There are so many things that you can think about that do it. But to me, it's always about the people. We certainly, as a city, I think we punch above our weight. We've won one more FA Cup more than the red team down the road, but that's a particular side issue. But, we were one of the most heavily bombed cities during the Second World War. We recovered with that. And probably one of the interesting things that go behind that is that Portsmouth was the first city to hold out a hand of friendship to a German city after the war for a twinning. So we also have that ability to recover and accept and build bridges as well. But certainly, and I won't dwell on it too long, for me, it is the people that make the city of Portsmouth.
Thank you, Simon. So, Matthew, what makes you proud about Portsmouth?
I mean, the easy answer for this, I did a history degree, so the easy answer would be to say about history. And certainly that is something I'm very proud of when I think about my own family in particular. If you skip off my parents, who are the kind of black sheep, odd ones out, it goes back, I think, 6 generations in my family that have lived, worked, and died in Portsmouth, and as a result, it's all of the people who have served in the Navy in my family, all of the people who have fought in the world wars in particular, and definitely something that was an inspiration for me in particular for my degree. But I think the things that I'm proudest of the most about Portsmouth are the things I'm proudest the most just generally about my country. So that's our kind of acceptance of diversity and our tolerance for providing a haven for others and giving opportunities to people, no matter what their backgrounds, to make something of themselves in this city. And as Simon touched upon as well, I think that sense of community spirit and the unsung heroes, the people that hold this city together and do so much to volunteer and to give their time because they love their communities and they really care about the city, is something that's so heartwarming for me in particular. I mean, when I moved away to university as well, I could have think of nothing more than wanting to be as far away from Portsmouth as possible. So I just applied for universities that were 100 miles away, and the second I moved away, I realized just how much I love this city and how much I wanted to come back, and I'm so proud now to be someone standing for local election in my local area and in my city.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. So I will now hand you on to Simon for closing speeches.
Okay, thank you very much both. Okay, so now our closing speeches. As we've done quite nicely for time, we'll give you a bit more time, so we'll flex and allow you up to 2 minutes. And to be fair, we'll be a bit fair and let you kind of finish your point if necessary. So we'll do that in the same order as we did earlier on. So it'll be Matthew first. Matthew, are you ready for your closing speech?
Yep. So I think one of the kind of, as I touched upon earlier, the kind of core foundations on being a good counsellor is being someone that's approachable, someone that treats casework as the absolute foundation of everything they do, making sure that they're responding to their residents and always being honest with their residents on the things they can help them with, and on always sharing their views and saying what they think about particular issues. And I think it's sad that across the board, in local government here and across the country, there are so many people, irrespective of their parties, who really don't care about responding to their residents, who really treat this for granted. And I would say that if I get elected, I will never treat my residents for granted. I will never forget about the privilege of being able to stand up for your community and serve the people that are your neighbours and that hold your community together.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Simon, you ready for your closing speech?
I am indeed. Well, I think over the last 24 years as being a local councillor, I've always been very proactive. I walk around the ward an awful lot. Usually got a notebook and pen in my pocket for people that I bump into so I can take their details. And I've always led, I believe, my local community with the things that they sort of want delivered for Drayton Farlington. I regularly have my residents knock on my front door. They all know where I live. They all know where my surgeries are. Certainly in my time as a councillor, I've delivered over £8 million worth of extra funding to the ward. That covers everything from pedestrian crossings. That doesn't include things like the crossing on Portsdown Hill, yet to add that figure to it. But we've also delivered a lot of things to enhance our local parks. All our local our parks are being enhanced, and they are resident-led rather, in what they're looking to achieve in those parks. We're working to deliver currently another £150,000 worth of enhancements to 2 more local parks. Always supported the residents here, being proactive. Like to think that the residents will probably like to re-elect me on the 7th of May so that I've got more to deliver to my local community, and I have to say to my neighbours, and in a lot of instances to my friends too. Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Thank you both.
So that brings us to the end of our Drayton and Farlington Ward Hustings, and on the podcast we always have great admiration for anyone and everyone who puts themselves up for what can be the toughest job interview in the world in terms of putting themselves before the local electorate. So thank you very much to Matthew and Simon for joining us to share their vision for Drayton and Farlington. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
I've been Simon Sansbury. And our candidates for the Drayton and Farlington ward hustings today have been Simon Bosher for the Conservatives and Matthew Holland for Labour. That's our last hustings for this year, but we will be streaming live from the count. So join us about 11 or 11:30 p.m. on Thursday, and we'll be bringing to you the actual results live. Our only other thing to say is if you are voting in person on May the 7th, please make sure to remember your photo ID, because you will need photo ID in order to be able to vote. You can find details about that on the Electoral Commission's website or on Portsmouth Council's website. But thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you there.
Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.